This is Resonance 104.4 FM. Flipping marvellous. And it's Literary London. I'm Nick Hennigan, and we're at the Edinburgh Festival for another orgy of art with a great talent. And I'm joined outside now. We're in the Assembly Gardens, literally outside. It's just stopped raining, so we're going to hope that we're all right for a few minutes with Tim Marriott. Hello, Tim.
Hi, how you doing?
Good, thank you. I mean, thank you for the chat and for the time and everything. And also thank you for your brilliant show that I came and saw today called Sherlock. We'll talk about the show in a minute, but just talk about yourself, because solo performers, one, sort of terrify me, the thought of doing it. But two, they do it really, really well. And you did a brilliant job today with this particular production.
You're very, very kind.
No.
A solo performance is something I've always said I would never do. I've always been... Well, two things. One, I'm terrified of doing such a thing, taking on such an enormous thing. And for me, theatre is all about relationships on stage, and it didn't really occur to me that you can kind of do that with a relationship with the audience. And so it came to me by chance. This particular piece. I said it's something I never thought I'd do, and it is. You're right. It is absolutely terrifying. The first time I did Sherlock was in Adelaide, off book. It was in Adelaide in 2018. And luckily, I had the great Guy Masterson in the audience cheering me on, who was very kind and supportive and helped me through those first couple of weeks. And he is a very, very experienced, as many people will know, solo performer, and his tips and guidance was invaluable.
Because he, obviously, I know Guy very well, having adapted and directed him in A Christmas Carol, which is currently doing the sources now. But did you train as an actor initially?
Yeah, I went to university, did English literature at university, and couldn't get rid of the acting bug, much as my family might have liked me to do. And so I went to the Webber Douglas, which doesn't exist anymore, a drama school. And from there I kind of fell into... I had a skiing injury in my last term, which kind of put paid to acting for a bit. I had a brain injury that kept me out of action for a while. So I started off in stage management, and that kind of led to directing and producing stuff. And then I got offered a tour doing a bit of comedy, and drifted into the world of comedy and found myself in a sitcom in the 1990s, which was fantastic and looked after me. It's called the Britass Empire, and was lovely to do. And really lovely people in the cast, and it was fantastic to do that for a while.
What was your character in it?
I played Gavin, who was one half of Tim and Gavin, and that was really pretty groundbreaking at the time.
It was. I loved it. I thought it was brilliant.
Well, an openly gay couple in a sitcom was something that you didn't see an awful lot of in the 1990s. But it kind of led me into a path of panto and summer season and touring Whoops Vicar, wearing my trousers gone farces type thing, and that wasn't making me terribly happy. And so I got out and went into the world of education, and spent 17 years in the world of education doing. I ran a little venue as well as part of the college. They had a 200-seat venue there, so I ran that, which was great, and was able to program some of my mates in to do shows, which was really good fun. And then in 2017, 2018, I got a commission. I did a bit of writing, writing stuff for mates or helping people do stuff. And I got a commission to adapt this soldier's diary, this fantastic soldier's diary, about not having a problem, about him coming out of service after a long service career and having no problems at all. It's just the rest of the world has a problem. And I thought that was a really unique way of approaching post-service life, and not doing lots of flashbacks to Afghanistan and that kind of thing, but actually discussing or getting into the difficulties of transition and putting that on stage as an identification piece. And that was really, really appealing. And I wrote it for one actor who was brilliant and came up here in 2017 and did a limited run of it and was fabulous. But he moved on. I got another actor to take it over, and that actor moved on 3 days before a gig to 300 veterans in Exeter.
Ouch.
Ouch, yeah. So I had no choice really but to pick up the script and do it myself. And I've been doing it ever since, and it's been really kind to me. It's taken me all over the world. It took me to Australia in 2018, took me to Adelaide first with Guy, and then it took me to back to Australia in October to do a 22-city tour, and then into Sydney alongside the Invictus Games, which was an incredible experience. And now I'm kind of reviving it here. for a week at the Edinburgh Fringe, which is fantastic, and you were very kind to come and see it and be so supportive of it. Thank you.
Oh no, it's brilliant. I mean, I think you actually said to me last night, you're going, well, the name Sherlock in some sense doesn't lend itself to a fantastic time. But what I really liked about it was exactly that. The way you presented the character, his warmth and normality is actually kind of what drives the drama a little bit. How did you come to adapt the book in the first place? Because you know the character that...
Yes.
The real character.
The real man himself, Neil Blower-Watkin, who wrote it. And again, what's unusual about it is he didn't write it as his memoir. He didn't write it as him telling his sad story, which lots of people do, and there's a very good reason that people do that, and some of that kind of work can be absolutely riveting. But what was different about his work, about Neil's work, was he wrote it as Tommy Atkins. He wanted it to be generic. He wanted the piece not just to speak to anybody who's been in service, in military service, about their experience of coping with post-traumatic stress, or not realising they have post-traumatic stress, but he wanted it to go beyond that, to appeal beyond the military community to anybody who's ever experienced stress and trauma, of which basically it's all of us, really, isn't it?
Yeah,
and that really appealed to me to do that. And the other thing was the humour in the guy. The guy is, and I've met him and several times now. And the thing that really draws you to him is his humanity and his warmth and the humour. And that's what the Army are brilliant at. They're brilliant at finding humour in the darkest places. And it's lovely today. The audience I had today really went with it and really got that roller coaster ride of the humour balanced with the tragedy that he faces of his life falling apart on the stage. And that was really exciting to do. And the other thing, no spoiler alert here, but the other thing that really appealed to me about the book, because I was given the book and he describes how he's going to finish things. And it's brutal and it's horrible. He describes about what he's going to do, and you're reading it and you think, and you forget that of course he's written this diary, so he can't have actually done it. You forget that, and you turn the page and there's a blank page, and you turn another page and there's a blank page. You turn the third page and it says, "I couldn't do it." And I thought that's great. That's drama gold dust, isn't it?
It was a beautiful moment. I mean, it was,
you all started applauding because you thought it was the end.
Everyone thought that was it.
No. And I've kind of given the game away a little bit there, but I think it's important for people to know that when I do this piece, and the title Sherlock was the title of his book, so I can't change that. But it is slightly misleading because people think they're going to see something that's deeply gloomy and very, very First World War orientated, and it's not. It's contemporary and it's very light in various moments. And it ends on a message of resilience and recovery, and that's really, really important. And Neil himself is the epitome of resilience and recovery. He's gone from that situation that I've just described to being a paramedic. He's got himself qualified as a paramedic, and on the day that I opened at the Edinburgh Fringe in 2018, he messaged me to say. He just qualified as a paramedic, and he messaged me to say half an hour before curtain went up, I got this text from him saying, "Good luck on your opening night, mate. I just want you to know that today I saved my first life." And that to me just says so much, not just about him, but about the ability for all of us to reinvent and find that resilience within us to recover and move on and rebuild.
And it's even more poignant, wasn't it? Because we know, and again, I'm not spoiling anything, we know that he killed people as part of his job as a soldier.
Yes, and that was a really poignant moment. I was sitting over dinner with him, and he talked about that, and he talked about the faces that haunt him to this day, and that's part of his thing. And then he just, he said. He talked about the number of people he's killed, and he just went very, very quiet for a second, dropped his head, and very, very quietly under his breath said, 11. And that was, there's chills in the back of my neck telling you that now. It was an extraordinary moment to find myself talking to somebody who's been through that experience. And he had no choice. I mean, that was what he was there to do, and these people were attacking him and trying to wipe him out, so he was responding to that. But it's pretty heavyweight stuff, that. But the fact that it flips the diary itself, and I do that on the stage, flips from that moment to a moment of farce in his life, because that happens to all of us. The absurdities of everyday life are sometimes farcical, and they're sometimes counterbalanced by moments of great tragedy. And to put that on stage is, I hope, a slice of humanity.
Yeah, I mean, it works. It works very well. As it is a very human story. As I say, I wasn't quite sure myself whether I was going to, excuse me, watch it's. I mean, yes, it's not really a wartime story, as you say. It's about survival.
No, again, that's kind of what makes it different. Is It's about post-war. It's about after service. And I say, there are. I've seen shows where a young, excitable cast will reenact the battle scene, on stage. And that's not what we do. It's basic storytelling. It's just me on stage chatting away and with the audience, and actually engaging the audience, getting them to talk back to me from time to time as well. Yeah,
you do that very well. And I say it's the warmth of the character that came across as well. Different accent. Love different accent. It's acting, isn't it?
Well, I have. Yeah, that's different accent because Neil is from Salford, near Manchester, and I can't be terribly exact about that, but I do have family from Skipton, which is on the Yorkshire-Lancashire border, and so it's quite natural for me to slip into that. I don't find it very hard to go into that because I'm quite used to. I spend time up there and I find myself talking like that anyway. The really interesting thing about that is that when I've done military shows, I mean, there was a show I did for the Royal Engineers, and 25 of the Royal Engineers took me out to a Gurkha restaurant for an Indian meal, to do a bit of a Q&A, and there's a guy sitting next to me, a sergeant sitting next to me, a really, really good bloke sitting next to me, and the first question comes in, and I answer it now like I'm answering this. And he turns to his mate and he said, "Crikey, he's a bloody Rupert," which means, if you don't know, means an officer. And I realised, of course, that because I talked like this, because I talk with my... So I had to go, "Oh, no, mate, sorry, no, it's my actor voice. No, ignore that, it's just me being poncy, no." So I had to spend the whole evening being Tommy, because that way you could... And you forget that when one's been trained to speak properly, properly, I don't know whether it's proper or not, but when one's been trained to speak with an RP accent, that it can sometimes put people off, So it was that was a real lesson.
I know Webber Douglas. My partner went there, actually, and Ralph Jago, who used to run it occasionally, used to bump into him. Webber Douglas Academy. It was in Kensington, wasn't it? South Kensington.
Yes.
And what did you always want to be an actor? Were you always going to go and train?
Yeah, I think.
What was childhood like?
I was sent away to boarding school at a very young age because my two older brothers went, and I think that was pretty impactful, and I think that made me. I was very small, badly asthmatic. And a bit of a target probably for some people, and I was bright, so I got pushed up a year group as well, and that brought a certain amount of problems as well. So I probably had to shout pretty loud to be heard, and I probably found that affirmation was difficult to achieve, and maybe that's what drove me to it. I don't know, but I was quite a shy child. I'm quite shy talking to you now, which is why I'm probably stuttering quite a bit. I find it difficult talking in this kind of situation, but and going on stage allowed me to be somebody else, to adopt a different persona, and I was fascinated with the communication element, with the ability to. I've discovered that I was able to tell a story in one way or another, and I was fascinated by that. And then the fact that I did English literature at university and at A-level, and was completely absorbed by Shakespeare and Hamlet in particular, and then going to do English literature. So it's not just the thrill of being on stage and that ability to put a mask on, but also text into action, and analysing a text, working out what the text is, and then finding a way to make it speak to a modern audience when you're working with Shakespeare. It's really, so I know it's something you've done very, very well, because I've seen your work, and that's a fascination, isn't it? Trying to make an ancient text speak again, because it's worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's some good stuff in there, isn't there? Really? I'm Nick Hennigan, talking to Tim Marriott, who is actor, performer. We're at the Edinburgh Festival. We're outside as well. We're in the Assembly Rooms yes, we are in Assembly Rooms. That's right. Assembly Rooms garden. So if you can hear a bit of wind noise, that's because it's a bit windy, isn't it? Right. How did you find lockdown? I'm asking most people that. How was it for you?
Well, lockdown for anybody who's a live performer is pretty brutal. When I came back into the business after teaching, I didn't have an agent. I still don't have an agent. I work for myself. There's no opportunity for me to go and do television or commercials or anything like that kind of actor type work. I don't really see myself as an actor. I see myself as a theatre maker and a storyteller. So that meant I had very limited opportunities. But my project manager, Ryan Gearing, who's very brilliant, who came to me with the original book, Neil's book, and asked me to adapt it, came up with this brilliant idea of talking to the NHS, Armed Forces Network, about making a film version of it. And we got grant fund. They thought, the NHS thought that was a brilliant idea, people we spoke to, and a couple of charities, other charities got involved and funded me to make a vlog. It wasn't, I wouldn't say it's a movie, it's a vlog, it's like a video diary. And the conceit is, of course, that when somebody does a video diary, they hold the phone. But I didn't hold the phone. We had a professional camera crew holding an iPhone and a proper sound recordist. So it was kind of done a little more upbeat and upmarket than a simple vlog. But it did give it authenticity, doing it that way, and that had a life for a while through the first lockdown. So the first lockdown was pretty good. And
the weather was good as well, wasn't it?
The weather was great, yeah. And I made another piece. I went on a holiday to Switzerland and went to Meiringen, which is where the Reichenbach Falls are, where Sherlock Holmes famously fell to his apparent end in the arms of Moriarty. And that story has always fascinated me, and it struck us over dinner, we were talking about it, that maybe it would be a good idea to tell that story from Watson's perspective. And that's what I'm doing next week.
Yes, I was about to come to that. That's your new production.
Yeah, so that kept me busy in the first lockdown, was developing that script, and we couldn't perform it, so we made an audio recording of it and put that out for people to listen to, which everyone seemed to encourage us into wanting to make a theatre piece, and that premieres at the Ed Fringe next week.
And what happens after that, hopefully? I mean, presumably you hope it goes well. Will you? Are there plans to tour? What's the theatre sort of landscape like at the moment? I mean, here we are in August 2021. Hopefully, inshallah, it's going to get a lot better as we go forward. But how do you think things are?
Well, I think things are beginning to open up. Every venue is different, but I have got some bookings, quite a few actually. And Sherlock, I continue to do Sherlock. I do behind the wire performances. I go into military centres and perform to soldiers as part of a mental fitness training programme, which is really good. So what we do is we do the performance and we follow it with a Q&A panel. So that's been great. I also do that in a few theatre venues. But Watson, I think, has real life for a theatre tour, and there are a few venues who've shown interest in that. I'm trying to think where I'm going. I'm going to Bath, I'm going to Petworth Festival in Fringe Festival in September, with that and another piece. You can't hold me down, I'm afraid. I feel like I've got time. I've got to catch up because I've been out of the business 17 years. So I do another piece called Waiting for Hamlet, which is a comedy two-hander, which I performed with a wonderful, wonderful comedy actor called Nicholas Collett. And me and Nick do Old King Hamlet and Yorick, and we've got a few gigs with that as well. So we're doing Petworth with both that and Watson, and then we're doing the Rondo in Bath with both plays. And as I say, I've got a few shell shocks to do, and I'm talking to a London venue at the moment about a possible run of Watson in town, which would be really nice.
That would be fantastic, wouldn't it? I mean, so what generally, without giving too much away, is the premise of the Watson story, your Watson story? I mentioned this as well because there was a lovely woman who wrote the film Tron. He's obsessed with Sherlock Holmes. She's moved over here. There's an interview, in fact, I'll promote it on here. But if you go back to bohemianbritain.com, this new website we've just launched, there's a video of her talking about her love for Sherlock Holmes and the fact she's moved to London almost because of it. So she'd be fascinated.
I must look that up. Yeah.
Oh, what's the story? What's your take on Watson? What happens without giving too much away, obviously?
Well, the link between the two shows is they're both old soldiers. They're both Afghanistan veterans.
Of course.
Which people don't always remember about Watson. He was shot twice in Afghanistan. He's a survivor of typhoid fever. And by the time we joined him in 1894, he's lost both his wife and his great comrade in arms in crime or detection in Sherlock Holmes. So he's a pretty traumatised and broken character. And so what we do is we join him in 1894, and London is seething with false reports and rumour. So there's a bit of a nod and a wink to where we are right now.
I was about to say, that sounds very strangely contemporary.
So there's a little bit of a link towards that, and we reference a little bit of that, and then I just go straight into the story, because what he wants to do is set the record straight. So he tells tells the story of Moriarty and the spider's web of crime in London, and because what's different about this story to other Holmes adventures is this isn't a mystery. This isn't a crime that gets resolved. It's an adventure. It's a journey. It's a journey across. And for any, as you know, as you're a great theatre maker, as you know, any good piece of theatre, I mean, really needs a journey. A good journey is a gift, and it's a journey across Europe, pursued by the shadow that is Sherlock Holmes. And that's another little angle that we were able to weave into the dialogue, is this sense of a shadow. The 1890s was a really interesting time in literature and philosophy, and you've got Jekyll and Hyde in the 1890s. You've got that sense of that dark cloud, the development of the industrial age, smog hanging over London, this sense of some doom, some gloom coming. And at the same time, you've got Freud developing his theories about the shadow self and duality. And you've got Holmes, who talks about Moriarty as being his mirror image. He talks about that he understands him, that he sees in him the man he could have become had he invested in crime. So very, very thematically, it's really interesting. Duality, shadow self, the combination of the two. So there's a lot to think about within the piece beyond just the story, and there's a lot to think about in Watson. He's not the buffoon that he was played in the films of the 30s and 40s. And they reference that a little bit in Sherlock with Martin Freeman and Benedict Cumberbatch, and the first episode where we saw Watson deeply affected by his Afghanistan experience, but then having dealt with it, they kind of left that to one side, and I don't quite do that.
But you're doing it by way of a one-man show, one-man performance.
Sorry, yes, it's a one-man show. It's just me storytelling, very like Sherlock. Me storytelling, telling the audience a cracking good tale, and it is a cracking good tale.
It sounds fantastic. Oh, it's a shame I'm not going to be here to see it next week in Edinburgh. But as you say, it'll be out and about, presumably then, touring.
Yes, I hope so. I've got some. I'm very lucky that it's co-written with a chap called Bert Coules, who anybody who's into Sherlock Holmes will probably know of. He's the chap who wrote all the radio adaptations. When the BBC adapted all the 56 stories of Sherlock Holmes in the 1990s, Bert Coules was the head writer, and they went so well, he actually went further and wrote some further stories of Sherlock Holmes. He's also wrote for Rebus and Cadfael and various other things. And when I had this great idea, we'll wait and see whether it's a great idea, but this idea of doing Watson, I thought, well, if I'm tackling something like that, I need an authority on board. So out of nowhere, poor Bert got accosted by this wannabe performer saying, "Do you fancy helping me with it?" And bless him, he took up the baton and ran with it, and he's been absolutely terrific. And I didn't realise, I went into rehearsal and I said, well, we're going to need somebody to do sound cues, and he said, well, I think I might be able to do something with that. It turns out that before he was a writer, he was a BBC sound engineer, so of course he could do that.
Perfect.
And I said, well, we probably need to get somebody in to direct it, don't we, Bert? And he said, well, I think I might be able to help you with that. It turns out he was directing stuff at the BBC as well, and I really hadn't done my research properly.
You've got the complete package there.
So I have got the complete package, and he's been fantastic. Yeah.
I mean, and some of your other shows. I mean, we performed in the same venue. I mean,
yes.
There was the Mengele show. That was quite. I used to see you at the end because we were on straight after you, and you always looked absolutely drained.
Well, that was, yes, Mengele. That was the a two-hander piece imagining Mengele on the beach, in which this is the Doctor of Auschwitz, imagining him drowned as he did in 1979 and discovered on this beach in Brazil, where he meets a woman who he thinks has come to save him, and she hasn't come to save him, she's come to collect him, but he doesn't see that. So what we do is we give him an opportunity for salvation, we give him an opportunity for redemption, we give him an opportunity to admit to what he did and atone in some way, and of course he doesn't. He completely refuses and talks very arrogantly about himself and his theories, and in doing so echoes some of the rhetoric that we hear nowadays. And the reason why that was so exhausting is because the final 5 or 10 minutes is when she condemns him, when she destroys him. So I had to go through that process on stage, and that was exhausting, but it's also pretty exhausting taking on an issue as important as the Holocaust and representing that character on stage and saying some of the really hateful things that he says is, I'm quite glad I'm not doing that anymore.
How did it go down at the time? Were audiences sympathetic? Did they kind of get what you were trying to do, I presume?
99 out of 100, yes. And it was a sellout show, so it did very well. critically did very well. There was one person in particular who took exception to it, but I think that was probably because that person didn't quite understand where we were coming from. Maybe, but everyone's entitled to their view. But generally speaking, across the world, we went to Australia with it as well, and got fantastic notices, and it sold very well, which was great. And the response. I don't want to bang on too much about it, but the response in America, we took it to New York for a Fringe Encore. We were very lucky to win a Fringe Encore at the Soho Playhouse in New York. And the Jewish Post did an article or a review, which was very encouraging, should we say, on the third day. And from there on in, the audience was of a certain demographic, of a certain age, and they found the piece incredibly cathartic, a real emotional release, and were hugely appreciative and looked after me very well.
Yeah, that's kind of lovely, actually, isn't it? When you can do that through your performance.
I can tell you that pretty much every performance in New York, I ended up in tears. It was pretty humbling stuff. When you meet people and they say to you, when you meet someone that introduces you to a Holocaust survivor. Or tells you a story about nursing their aunt who was a Holocaust survivor, or I don't want to bore you, but I got a lot of stories after that show, and some of them were haunting and humbling, and good to meet these people and to hear their stories.
Yeah, it's quite cathartic. And I wonder as well, if you don't mind me mentioning, because you said you were ill. I mean, shell shock is about a person kind of dealing with stuff. Did that have a big effect on you, without wishing to be too personal? You said you'd had that skiing accident. That must have been quite traumatic.
Yeah, interesting. I never really thought about it till I did Shell Shock. I never really thought about my father died in my A-level year, very suddenly, which was a bit of a shock to everybody. And then I had a girlfriend who was killed in a car accident just before my finals at university, which was pretty bizarre. I mean, people aren't meant to die when they're 21. It was a bit of a shock to everybody, that one. And then, skiing accident in my final term at drama school. I went skiing, late season skiing in April, just before I went into my last term at drama school. Thought that was a brilliant idea. It was a fantastic idea. And came a cropper on a ski slope and spent 3 days asleep, in a very, very deep sleep, if you know what I mean. And 8 months recovery after that was not what you want when you're starting your acting career. And I didn't really think about those three things, but they were probably pretty formative. And they do come back to me from time to time. But when I'm not alone in that, we've all got stories to tell. We've all experienced trauma and stress and anxiety in our lives. And I think towards the end of my teaching career, I really struggled. I was tired. I was exhausted. Anybody who's been a teacher knows that can be being a teacher can be attritional, but teaching a subject like drama for 17 years was pretty exhausting. And I wasn't in a very good state when I left teaching. And Shell Shock's been fantastic for me, because it's been a kind of therapy to go through, to understand the process that Neil's been through and portray him on stage. And that's what I mean about what's so great about Shell Shock, is it might be military framed, but it speaks to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was a brilliant show. Well, Tim Marriott, thank you so much for your time. If anyone wants to know any more about what you're up to, have you got a website, or is there a link?
Yeah, I have a website, smokescreenprods.com. I don't know why it's prods, maybe I couldn't spell productions, but it's smokescreenprods.com, and information about all the shows are on there.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Tim. Another Fringe legend. That's all we've got time for, but thank you for listening. I'm Nick Hennigan. This is, I keep having to say, bohemianbritain.com. Also on the londonliterarypubcrawl.com website, and of course on Tut Wireless, Resonance 104.4 FM.